It is finally time. Hi everyone, my name is Kayla and welcome back to Kay's Hidden Shelf where we talk about books. Today I finally have my September wrap up. Let's dive in. Overall, September was a good reading month. I had some fantastic reads, but I also had a read that wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be. So let's start with that one, and that is Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is book one in a trilogy, and I was expecting this to be a hard sci-fi about terraforming and colonizing Mars. And yes, while that is in there, this is much more heavy on political and social interactions. Now, originally, this started as a buddy read, and it did take me a few months to finish. It is dense and it does have some hard sci-fi in here, which seems really well researched, which was fantastic. I enjoyed that. But there was a lot of psychological analyzation of characters, political intrigue, and factions. There's a lot of events that take place that I just wasn't anticipating. Now, one part that I did find interesting was this did feel like a deep dive into a character study with multiple points of views that we see. There were also a lot of moments of exploration, the possibilities that can happen when humanity does reach out and start to colonize other planets, going from scientists pushing the boundaries of science to factions, exploration, and the political aspects that take place when humanity starts moving into colonizing. Not to mention the different types of power struggles that we see, including internal struggles with the characters themselves, but also relationship struggles that we see between all of these characters. So I did enjoy the hard sci-fi and the potential what ifs that came across with humanity's possible future among the stars. However, where I started to get lost with this was the sheer amount of politicking, the interpersonal dramas, and just the vast amount of events that take place in this that are meant to evoke emotions or shocks or some kind of reaction from the reader. Because there is so much going on, I eventually just started to feel numb to all of the events occurring. Overall, this is an okay read. It's not what I was expecting when I initially picked it up, and that could be influencing it as well. However, it is such a dense and heavy read that even months after finishing it, I'm still digesting some of the information that I had read in this. Overall, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Like I said, there are some good elements and just some things that did not work for me. I do think this would be a great read for hard sci-fi fans who also love politics and interpersonal dramas. For myself, I don't believe I'll be continuing with the trilogy. It is sad. I was really looking forward to reading them all and seeing what it was about, but after this, I don't believe it's quite in my reading taste, unfortunately. The next book I read was one I've already done a spoiler-free review for, so I'll link that above in the cards where you can find that if you're interested. So I'll just go over this one briefly, and that is Badon Hill by I.Anonymous. This is book 2 in the Wars of Wrath series, the first book being Gurzel. Now, this is a self-published YA historical fiction and fantasy. The events of Badon Hill pick up right where Gurzel had left off, and we're thrown right back into the world and the characters. Now, for those of you who don't know, this series is a retelling of Arthurian legend. We do see a lot of familiar characters such as Guinevere and Arthur Pendragon, along with several other characters throughout the story and across the world. In Badon Hill, events start to come together as all of that setup in Gurzel begins to pay off. Now, we do continue with a multiple point of view story here with points of views from 14 characters. After my experience with Gurzel, and with that I had tracked all of the characters in that book, I had made sure I was following the story of each character so that I did not get confused. This time, going into Badon Hill, it was much easier to keep track of the characters, and I don't know if that has to do with how I tracked them originally in Gurzel or of how well I got to know them throughout the story. The benefit of having so many points of views is that we get an in-depth look at not just the plotline, but the histories of all of these characters as well as the character connections. The plot also continues to thicken as various events begin to pull you in to the conflicts at hand, as the battle at Badon Hill is not far off, and the dragon Gurzel is making his move. Similar to Gurzel, the storytelling style of I.Anonymous continues as we get flashbacks from the characters' points of views. This gives us an in-depth look into the characters' histories, their motivations, and the events that led up to this point. And for those who don't generally like flashbacks in their stories, I did find that these flashbacks are woven in a way that does make it a smooth reading experience. I will say that there were also morally gray and more complex characters than we had initially seen in Gurzel, which was the absolute highlight for me in this. Unfortunately, there were some tropes that didn't quite work for me. However, these were towards the romance genre, which generally isn't in my taste to begin with. Overall, this was an entertaining read at 314 pages. The pacing throughout was medium, and there was lots of events to keep me engaged in the story and the characters' developments. I.Anonymous continues to build epic characters, complex relationships, richens the world, engages the reader in political intrigue and great action. Overall, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I am looking forward to continuing with this series to see where it goes. Next, I read Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. This is a self-published fantasy book that follows a young boy called Aram and his journey to save the world. This is a coming-of-age story that touches on dark situations, has epic action scenes, and an ancient darkness that threatens the world. Aram sees the world differently and is treated poorly for it. He just wants to make friends and be accepted, but rather is outcasted instead. Unknown to Aram, he is much more than he seems and holds a power that most would kill for. One of the things I loved in this is how M.L. Spencer expertly crafts the bonds of friendship throughout a compelling story. We are treated to a variety of complexities that add to the plot's depth, with autistic representation and what it means to be different. I personally found that Aram's character work was thoughtfully done and hit the mark. Watching his inner struggles and growth was an absolute delight for me. The world building itself was also detailed and was easy to fall into, reminiscent of a classic fantasy world. We get to see a variety of magical creatures, dragon riders, lore, and just a complexity to the world's development that I wasn't originally anticipating when I went into this. This is a world that I'll miss, but is one that I look forward to coming back to one day. I think the big win in this for me was how M.L. Spencer explores the characters' internal struggles and their relationships. Along with the developments and the world building, they were all intriguing and kept me wanting to read. Now, this is a chunky book at 830 pages, and I will be honest because I have had discussions with other booktubers about this book. This book isn't for everyone. I certainly agree that there are flaws with the story and with some of the points that are brought into the characters' situations. However, I loved it anyway. It's just one of those books where, yes, I know it's not perfect, but I still loved it for the emotions that it left me with at the end. This is also a slow burn with fast scenes throughout these stories, so the pacing is a bit all over as you're reading through, which can be tricky for some readers. Now, I did listen to the audiobook, which was narrated by Ben Farrow, and he did a fantastic job at narrating this and getting across the situations and emotions of the characters. Now, this does read like a standalone, though I believe book 2 is also in the works. To sum up, this had dragons, action, friendship, intriguing world building. We get fully realized characters and characters you love to hate. There was just a lot to love here for me, and like I said, it wasn't a perfect story, but I still loved it regardless. As a result, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm looking forward to continuing with book 2 and the other stories that M.L. Spencer has written. Next, I ended up reading a book that wasn't originally planned, but I needed something different. This is The Stars Within by Alex Arch. Now, this is a sci-fi with heart, action, and leaves you wanting more. If I could have, I would have reread this right after finishing it. It also accomplishes a lot within a short page count, as I believe this is just over 100 pages long. This follows 2 points of views from Thomas and Colette. Thomas is striving to create a better life for his expecting wife and their family, and while he has supporting friends, unfortunately, they're locked into a bleak life on a mining planet. Thomas finds himself down on every turn and fighting cancer. Colette is a retired military hero called back to action for one last mission to save humanity. However, she finds herself caught up in old feelings for an old flame as she tries to focus on her mission. This novel quickly builds up characters that you feel for, and you can't help but love. There's a great mix of character work and suspense that builds with the plot, all the while pulling at your emotions. Creating a balance between these two aspects of a story is tricky, and I feel like Alex did a fantastic job at pulling this off. We see characters who feel human, their emotions, and the impacts that has on their choices made for a compelling read. The storyline is engaging and made this hard to put down. And like I said, I wanted to reread it immediately after finishing. A big reason why is that this is the kind of story that leaves you on the edge of your seat and keeps you thinking. This was certainly a fast-paced sci-fi with a lot of heart put into it from the author. Great characters and relationships, themes that are explored that will keep you thinking into your own personal life as well. Great action, and a book that I will be saving again for a rainy day. With such an impactful read from a debut author, I am eager to read more from Alex Arch. Overall, I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. Next, I read The Year Before the End by Vidar Hokstad. Now, this is a book I received in exchange for an honest review and is another fast-paced sci-fi. It is a self-published book and book 1 in the Sovereign Earth series. The difference with this sci-fi is we have a lot of gritty characters you can't help but cheer for, a heist in space, and a lot of action involved in this as well, more so than The Stars Within. The story here being that when humanity finds out they aren't alone in the galaxy, they're given instructions to build a gate. This gate would allow humanity to connect with a larger system to travel across space. The Centauri are the ones who provided this to humanity and promised them the galaxy. Some years later, we follow Captain Zoe, a mercenary who takes jobs with great care, as she values her crew's safety above all else. After finding out about a conspiracy between Mars separatists and the Centauri to split the solar system between themselves, Zoe takes on a job that she might have otherwise passed on. Instead, she decides to act and needs to infiltrate a highly protected station to uncover the truth. When things turn bad, however, Zoe needs to find a way to save not only her crew, but humanity. Now, I will say this is packed with action and does not waste any time pulling you into the story. There's a quick introduction to the characters and the world, and then we're thrown right into the story itself. There were a lot of great characters as well that felt grounded and had an engaging dynamic between them. This made it easy to fall into their personalities and made them distinct from one another and intriguing in their own ways. These are characters who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty and were charming. Between well-explored characters and world building that just gives us enough to get lost into the pages, this made for an entertaining and quick read. Now, the characters' backstories and some of the world building is explored through exposition, though this did flow with the story overall. And there were elements explored with the characters that felt probable in sci-fi elements. At 235 pages, there's a lot accomplished here and a lot to keep the reader engaged, as there's a lot of action, there's that heist going on, and the captain needs to make some hard choices. This is the kind of sci-fi you could binge in a day or two, as it starts with a medium pacing and goes fast right to the end. This was a fantastic read. It had a lot to it. It had a heist, great characters, we got political intrigue, some mystery, factions, high stakes, betrayal, and keeps you thinking. I definitely recommend this for sci-fi readers who enjoy epic sci-fi adventures with lots of action, or those who might be new to sci-fi and want to give this a try, as it doesn't have a lot of hard sci-fi elements, but rather keeps you engaged in the story and actions that are going on along with the character situations. Overall, I give this 4 out of 5 stars, and I do want to continue with the story as it was a refreshing read. And the last book I read in September was Wistful Ascending by J.C.M. Berne. This is a superhero space opera by a self-published author. Now, I did receive this book in exchange for an honest review, and I've already done a full spoiler-free review video, so I'll leave a link up in the cards where you can find that if you're interested in seeing my full thoughts on this. Now, this is a promising start to a new series with a character you can't help but feel for. This is book 1 in the Hybrid Helix series, where we find artificial intelligence, first contact, a superhero, assassins. We also get a lot of action, impactful moments, mystery, and romance. In this, Rohan is a hybrid, half human and half Ildrak. After years of fighting for the Ildrak's armies, doing unspeakable things, he retires to a quiet and peaceful life on the space station called Wistful. Now, Wistful is a sentient space station, and he ends up working as a second-class tow chief, pulling in spaceships to the station for docking. As Rohan tries to maintain this peaceful life, a wormhole opens in space near the station. A refugee ship comes through, and they're angry. This event ends up drawing a lot of attention towards the station and Rohan as well, as Rohan tries to keep his past a secret and his power and control. Events occur that challenge this. While we get space battles and fight scenes, that's not all this superhero space opera is. This is the story of a man who wants to do better, to be a better person. And it just made this feel reminiscent of Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree in a way, as there is a slice of life element to this, but with higher stakes. Rohan felt like any other person I might meet, a genuine character that felt more realistic as I read, with a witty sense of humor. As Rohan attempts to lead a new life, away from his Ildrak nature and old behaviors, his internal struggles, and the attempts to maintain control of his powers were gripping. Overall, Rohan was an endearing, complex, and witty character, and there was also a great cast of side characters in this as well. Not only that, his developments, his motivations are well explored in this, and the more you read, the better you get to know Rohan. Now, while I'm not a romance reader, I actually enjoyed the romance in Wistful Ascending. The romance felt down to earth, it felt like it contributed to the characters, their developments, and I truly appreciated that the author maintained integrity to the characters' work, not sacrificing all of that for the sake of romance and drama. It didn't feel like a plot device or trope heavy, but rather made the romance feel natural to the story. The pacing was medium to fast, with a natural and smooth story progression. I also ended up reading the physical copy along with the audiobook available on Audible, and I'll be honest, the narrator, Wayne Farrell, did a fantastic job, and I cannot hear Rohan's voice or this story be told by any other narrator. The narrator just did a phenomenal job at bringing the characters to life and capturing the tone of the book. Now, as I said, this was reminiscent of Legends and Lattes for the slice of life feeling, but also seeing a character struggling with a new life outside of their old nature, and of course found family. This also does feel reminiscent to the MCU universe, as well as the humor you might see in not just that universe, but also Guardians of the Galaxies would be a good example here as well. For myself, this is a series I can't wait to continue with Book 2, Return of the Griffin, and Book 3, which recently released, Blood Reunion. I'm hoping to read those two back to back, and I am so eager to get back into the world and with our character Rohan. With the slice of life feeling, the action, and the hard-hitting moments that do occur in this, I truly hope you give this superhero space opera a try. Overall, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So that is everything I read in September. Again, I apologize that these wrap-up videos are coming out late. I definitely want to get these back on track, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that for all of you. The wrap-up videos in particular take a long time to record and edit, which is partly the reason why they're late. The big reason for transparency purposes is that back in September, I had actually lost my voice and ended up having to use a lot of backlog footage that I had to keep the footage coming for you guys, but that meant that I wasn't able to record anything new at the time. So I'm hoping to get back on track by putting September and October's wrap-up videos out in November. Thank you for bearing with me while I try and get these out best I can. And I've even played around with the idea of maybe dividing the wrap-up videos a bit into a mid-month check-in and end-of-month wrap-up. Let me know what you think. Would you like to keep the wrap-up videos the way that they are in one big video, or would you prefer to see it broken down throughout the month? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care of yourselves.